We have some good people. I mean, we have some of the advocates that we need to put together a coalition for. I mean, there are many coalitions. Let's see how we can work together to create the change in the world that we wish to see. We've all been doing it, and now it's our moment. Okay, guys, we're going to start, and then we're going to be bringing, as people come in, we'll continue. This is being recorded, as I believe you all know, and once after the session is over, what we're going to do is we're going to post this to our website, for which you can use it as you see fit. I just wanted to introduce do a little bit of background. As you all know, this is Gray Panthers NYC, and we've been in existence for many years. Our current initiative, which is honoring nursing home lives, has been quite successful. We did, as you probably all know, we did our documentary last year, which ended up honoring nursing home lives lost, which became an award-winning documentary. And following that, understanding the devastating effect of COVID on long-term care facilities and just the constant death and waves of death, we created this webinar series of Transformation Tuesdays, of which Michelle Arnaud, who's also on, our vice president, had been the inspiration for that. Today, we are thrilled to be able to host Assemblymember Ron Kim, who has been the leader in the efforts for nursing home and long-term care reform in the New York State Legislature. His background on this comes from, and his passion is fueled not only by personal experience, but because of his incredible his advocacy and leadership in the state of New York. He is the leader, and we are thrilled to be able to have him as our town hall. The way we're going to do this today is that Assemblymember Kim will deliver some remarks, and then we'll also open it up to questions. For us, the questions must go into the chat, and then we'll be able to make some selections as to which questions we wish to present. And what we've already received a lot of questions. So we're going to intersperse the questions that come into the chat with the questions that have already been delivered to us. By the way, my name is Jack Kupferman, and I'm the president of Gray Panthers NYC. Just wanted to do a very brief bio for Assemblymember Kim. Assemblymember Kim is the first Korean American to serve in the New York State Legislature. Since his election in 2012, he's supported and has a record of supporting female and fellow Asian American colleagues to join him in public office. He's the chair of the Assembly Aging Committee and has been a strong and persistent advocate for the safety, rights, and quality of life for older persons in New York. He is a Queens native and lives in Queens. And one of the things that is most fantastic about him is that his passion on this issue for long-term care and nursing home reform is the kind of leadership that we need and we rarely find. He has been a great friend to us and to all of us on this call, and I know that everybody is excited to hear from him. I would like to ask you, Assemblymember Kim, to just give us some comments.
Thank you, Jack, and it's so good to see everyone on this virtual town hall today. I do appreciate all the organizing and all the efforts that Gray Panthers have put forward. This is a great organization that's been around for a long time, but especially during COVID, you stepped up to connect everyone, to make sure that we had a platform and we had the knowledge all across the country to come together And throughout this network, I personally have learned quite a bit. And in addition to being fighting for older adults, I've also been, partially in kind of osmosis mode, where whenever I get a chance to sit down and learn from experts who have been pushing for anti-ageist policies, as well as fixing our home, community, nursing home, institutionally, improving these sectors. I've just been learning nonstop throughout COVID, and I'm still, I still embrace the questions, and I still embrace being challenged on where we want to take this. But what Gray Panthers have also done in spending significant energy and effort to officially recognize and memorialize the lives lost is it has an indelible impact in shaping our mindset and the way that we view and treat older people, because the way that our government and society has treated older people during COVID is completely dehumanizing and unacceptable. And if we're not here as a network to say that's not right, we need to put the politics aside. And if you make mistakes in terms of policy, it's okay. Like, we can hold you accountable, but it's okay to say, I'm sorry that I'm making mistakes here, because we've never done this before in this type of a pandemic. But what's been happening institutionally is that everyone just began to cover up for each other, and everyone became very dishonest about our broken system. And because they individualize the problems as politicians, policymakers, or administrators. This is not about any one person. This is about a broken system that a lot of us inherited over many decades in the making. And unless we start off honestly about where we're failing and why we're failing, I don't see how we can move forward in a productive way. So with that, I've focused a lot of my energy from long-term care, from nursing home facilities in the last few months to home and community care, because as many of you know, with the broken home and community care system, we are institutionally pushing older folks into institutionalized care, where right now up to 20 to 25% of older adults do not need to be in these facilities if we had a working home and community care system in place. So that's why I've pivoted a lot of my energy to call out the broken system, and not to blame anyone in person, but systemically start addressing, what do we need to do better. And I look forward to having a robust conversation and getting to your questions to collectively understand this and find the solutions to improve our long-term care system.
And did you want to also tell us about some of your current initiatives?
Well, there's two things that I want to highlight, Jack. There's, during COVID, it was so easy for the state government, not only in New York, but throughout the entire country, to take away the rights of older adults, patients, and consumers. In the stroke of a pen, they protected industry profits from hospitals to nursing homes while taking away the rights of older adults as patients and consumers. I'm talking about, providing a legal shield from nursing homes and hospitals being sued or being criminally held liable. It took us about 8 months of pushing back, advocacy, and organizing to repeal that law, to restore the rights of older adults. And it took us another year to finally, amend the wrongful death statute in the state of New York, which was written over 160 years ago, that devalues the lives of older adults, especially women and women of color, because the lives of people are determined in the eyes of the court by dollar signs and economic value, not the generational knowledge, the trauma of a wrongful death poses to a family or to the community. Not, we just determine the value in monetary terms, and that is not good enough. Most states have repealed and improved on this law, but New York has not. And we actually passed this law to make sure that we update the standards of how we capture the pains and suffering of families when we lose a loved one to negligence, institutional negligence. And this is a game-changing law that the Governor Hochul signs that would overnight push all the industry to be better, because now there's economic and financial consequences for being negligent, especially at some of the larger facilities. But it's taking us so long to strengthen the rights of older adults, but it takes such a short period of time, in an emergency, to take people's rights away. And I just want to point that out. So we have a bill pending for the governor to sign. And secondly, we are launching an initiative called the Caring Capital, to encourage local counties and local governments to get back into the business of home and community care. In 1980s, there was a point where New York made a conscious choice to adopt the contract model, where we outsourced all of community, home, and care work to third parties. Other states like California during that time in the 1990s came to the advocates, the unions and consumers came together and kept a lot of home and community care as in-house government service, as a guaranteed public service, where each counties were mandated to set up a public authority to help finance and pay for home and community care in the state of California. We took a different approach. And many years later, there's absolute no accountability. There's failings in payments, reimbursements. There's massive wage theft without any recourse of the workers. There is a colossal mess, and no one wants to touch it because they don't want to be held accountable. And in many ways, it's a perfect system for politicians, because as long as we sign the contracts and say, hey, we're giving $10 million for this nonprofit to do home care, we absolve ourselves from the responsibility of overseeing and administering home care as if it's a right. And that's kind of where we are right now. And part of our policies is to get the states, get the localities and counties to get back into home and community care in meaningful ways.
Thank you. Thank you. What I'd like to start doing is I wanted to go from some of the questions that have been presented to us already. And as you can see in the chat, a lot of people have questions. And this is really exciting, which talks about the small number of us who are advocates and concerned on this issue, how passionate we are. But, how do we translate that into the larger community? Let's start with that as a question. Okay, could you unmute? I can't hear you.
Can you repeat that question? Because I was reading through the questions in the chat room. I got distracted for a minute. Can you repeat the question?
Basically, is like there's a small number of advocates on this issue and people who have expressed concern. How do we translate that into a larger advocacy base? And how do we affect change together?
Yeah, I think, we need to set aside our individual agendas, and as policymakers, providers, contract agencies, I think all of us, if not most of us, if not all of us, are in this for the right reason. Otherwise, you would have walked away from this a long time ago. You wouldn't be in this town hall participating in these conversations. And we need to come together and understand where we're failing. And for me, I know, again, I come back to this. I feel very passionate that as long as we continue to treat care work as a contract work, and we are continuing the cycle of privatizing public service, and there has to be an industry-wide and a collective discussion about, and we've never, throughout history, we've never reached this point where we scale back and rebuild public institutions, but this is I think a moment where we need a common agenda, and it can't just be about improving payments to providers, because there's a much, I think, deep-seated broken system in place that we're not talking about.
Thank you. I wanted to, well, I'm also going to take another one of the questions that came in before. The implementation and enforcement of most, if not all, nursing home reform laws depends on the New York State Department of Health to review nursing homes for compliance. For example, audits, and to establish consequences and penalties for non-compliance. But these laws don't have much teeth and therefore are relatively meaningless. How would you like to see the legislature ensure that the New York State Department of Health has the tools and staff to do the job per the language of the laws? Basically, the laws are okay, the enforcement is crappy.
There has been some positive developments in Minnesota, where a couple of these facilities that were proven to be very predatory and not serving the communities and be failing all the standards for years, and they fell into receivership by the state. I do not know what the outcome will be after the state receivership, but in lieu of such an action where the state is serious about holding these facilities accountable, these failing grades and penalties and fines, if they get them, is merely symbolic, and it's not meaningful enough to shift institutional change. And secondly, if Governor Hochul signs the Grieving Families Act as it is without amendments, it will make the industries act in a much better way, where they would have to start investing in safe staffing. They would have to invest in better care, because their negligence would translate into real monetary consequences, because now we would be capturing not just how much a person is economically productive in terms of money value, but all the pain and suffering of that act of negligence caused to that person and the family members and surrounding friends. All that stuff will be considered in the eyes of the court. So those are, I think, game-changing things that would push the industry to be better. But again, going back to the Caring Capital initiative, unless the state has sound plans of coming in and using a bigger stick to say, you can't let private equity firms come in here and take over all these nursing homes, and we will also be actively participating in possibly converting these places back into county-run facilities, which have been highly successful in upstate New York. In lieu of such a stick, I just don't see how the industry will take any of the enforcement seriously in New York or other states.
Thank you. I have a question from one of our participants. Have you given thought to what a long-term care support and services financing program beyond Medicaid that allows people to receive care in their preferred setting would look like in New York State? The state of Washington is implementing a social insurance program. Could something like that work in New York?
Yeah, we're looking at social impact investments. We've been talking to social impact bonds experts, and the reason why we also looked at carefully what California did in setting up county authorities, public benefit corporations to back home and community care is because that if you do that, that sets us up with the foundation to finance to find different ways to finance home and community care for each county. There's a deficit because home care is based on Medicaid waiver programs, and it's not an entitled program, meaning even if you qualify, the federal government is not legally mandated to pay for home care. They've systemically created a deficit right from the inception of how these programs were funded. If the states and localities don't figure out how to fill that gap, don't expect the federal government or Medicaid to come up with that funding. So we need to find creative ways until the federal government treats it like an entitlement program to help finance the crisis growth of older adults that each state is dealing with in this country.
Thank you. One of the things that we're talking about right now is the money and the financing. What about the people and ensuring that the people who, whether they're at home or they're in some sort of a facility, have the opportunity to thrive, to live, to enjoy life, and not be considered just another bag of bones? And what can we do about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is all about, we're doing this because of the people that are being neglected and the people who are being treated as less human. And we reached a point during COVID, many of us just became even desensitized to older adults dying around us. And that's not okay. And the reason why I'm focused on trying to change this narrative that community and home care should be treated like a public service and provide and guaranteed by local government services is because that is the only way we can guarantee the safety of people. The moment we outsource and privatize anything in the care sector, the moment we advocate ourselves as administrations, the duty to actually deliver and guarantee those services. Yes, we had no choice in many states, had to adopt the contract model because we couldn't figure out how to pay for and meet the demand of every person. And we needed a system to manage the demand of the home and community care. But after many decades, we're reaching a point where it's not sustainable, and we're reaching a crisis point where we can't just punt this down the road. And I'm not saying this because I want to punish providers. I think so many providers have stepped up and were there for my constituents, older adults, and have provided amazing outcomes and outputs over the last many years. But what I'm saying is that sometimes the outcomes does not equate to actually fixing the root cause that's driving ageism and ageist outcomes. And we need to figure out how do we, bridge that gap at this point, because we can't continue to just rely on contracts and outsource model to fix our broken ageist social problems.
What you were just saying in terms of noting the ageism here, how do you see that it manifests itself, and what can we do about that, both legislatively, and how can the people do something about that?
Yeah, I've been going through some of the chats, and I'm recognizing there's other people in these facilities, not just old people. There are people with disabilities and from all ages that are in these long-term care facilities. But the reason why, well, there's two. I chair the Committee on Aging, so this is the space that I'll oversee around older adult rights. And secondly, this is the one place where gender violence, racism, sexism, it all intersects, but for whatever reason, culturally, we just didn't coin this term until recently. Like no one wanted to talk about ageism, but at a time when we all wanted to police racism and sexism, ageism was, for whatever reason, culturally left out. And part of it, I mean, I'm still learning a lot about this and how we came to this point, but I think part of it is also because we're such a youth-centric, commercially driven, society where no one wants to see old people on images. No one wants to, because they think they can't sell product. The more we highlight older images, and that drives also political perceptions and political policies. It has an intangible effect in how we perceive older adults, to a point where we can even dehumanize them and leave them behind, and be desensitized as they're dying in these facilities, and because we can walk away not feeling emotionally attached to it. That's where we are. And unless we call it what it is, and we start policing those behaviors like the way with Democrats police racism and sexism, we're going to continue to have this problem. And that's why I think culturally and socially, it's important to call out ageist language and ageism, as we scale back and undo the many years of normalized ageism in our society.
And how can we flip that? How can we make this the engine for positive change in long-term care and nursing homes, even more specifically? How do we flip the concept of ageism?
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to the Grieving Families Act. I mean, I think economically, making the argument that older people's lives financially matter and economically matter sends a strong message to the industries at large. But I mean, I think beyond that, celebrating in any kind of capacity, including the memorial that you've done, the documentary that you've done, but let's push the state government to memorialize that beyond a film. Let's set up, somewhere in a park, or some place where we can celebrate the images of people who passed away in long-term facilities, and not be ashamed to promote these images. And I think those things, tremendously. I talk about this with Greg Olson from SOFA, because he does a lot institutionally, little by little, to change the perceptions. Like, for example, he and I are talking about engaging young people to submit images of positive aging images for license plates for New York, that we can have a contest for young people to submit, and we can pick winners. And there's a lot of small things and big things I think we can do through our schools, through engaging the young people, our youth, and our policies, that we can start changing our ageist culture.
And obviously, Assembly Member, we would love to be partners in all of these efforts. There's so many questions that we have. Here's one that I'm not even particularly familiar with, but it says, I'm also interested in hearing about the caregiver tax credit. So many New Yorkers are caring for loved ones and could benefit from it. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's something that I worked with AARP, and we fought and we couldn't get it to the finish line. And it's what, again, it comes to financing, and how when it comes to care, there's always a hiccup on how we're going to pay for it. And unless we have more revenue streams in the form of progressive taxes that are dedicated to funding these initiatives, the other way that publicly we finance anything is borrow against future incomes and float, in this case, what will be a social impact bond. So, we're exploring all these paths to figure out and working with these experts. If we're not getting revenue streams, how are we going to pay for this? Because the state is not the federal government. We don't print money. We don't have the power of the purse. So if you don't tax to get new revenues, we need to borrow against future incomes in the form of bonds to pay for certain services. So we're looking at various options of what makes sense and what we can get done at the state to start putting real money that will cover tax credits and tax money, tax incentives for full-time caregivers. Other states have done it. Other states have found other creative ways to finance, home care and home community care. Like I think Hawaii has a Medicaid, I forget what they're called, but it will come back to me in a minute. But every state has different variations of how to finance and pay for long-term care. And I think New York just hasn't taken it seriously, and we've just punted it and hope that the providers will figure out how to provide services when we don't really pay for it.
Another former question, and then I'll be going into the chat. In recent years, not-for-profit nursing homes are increasingly bought by for-profit change. The quality of life and the quality of care of the for-profit homes are significantly poorer than those in not-profit homes. They're often just human factories. What legislative or other strategies exist that can stop this destructive trend? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the investors, the private equity predatory firms that have entered this space have destroyed lives. I mean, it resulted in gross negligence, and many people died as a result of their greed. Some states, like in the South, they took on these private equity run for-profit nursing homes head on, and forbid them from buying any more facilities. The prosecutors in those states got involved. The Attorney General of New York I can't publicly comment, but she is taking on many of these cases now. There's an active, I think, investigation into many of these predatory facilities, and hopefully there'll be some outcomes from her office in the near future. But legislatively, they're beyond just putting a band-aid on forbidding private equity firms and other people to come in and just buy things in bulk and scale and running like chain stores. The whole ecosystem, how we reimburse in Medicaid and the healthcare cost is also problematic, because the intermediaries, the 25 or 30 managed long care intermediary systems are all for profits, right? So and they do, they implement this capitation based system based on an algorithm, and it's all for profit. So if the money that leaves the public realm goes into a for-profit intermediary, they're more likely going to want to do more business with for-profits. And so the vertical integration that we are institutionally creating, in my opinion, fuels more privatization of care work, which is why over the last 10 years under the previous governor's watch, many county-run nursing homes were sold off to for-profits and closed down and sold off to for-profits. We don't see the reverse happening. We don't see any counties trying to step in and offer the services as guaranteed services by county or local governments. And I think that's the direction that we should be exploring if we actually treat long-term care and care as an infrastructure and not just something that no one wants to deal with.
Oh, thank you. There's a very, probably will take a moment to say. Do you know when the executive order for the master plan on aging in New York will be issued?
We're in talks right now with the Department of Health. There seems to be some internal administrative back and forth, because the agency that I oversee, the State Office for Aging, should be the one that's taking a significant lead on this, but the Department of Health has Medicaid based home care and nursing homes under that department. So internally, I think there's sort of like a going back and forth to see who's going to set the overall agenda for this plan. And my person in SOFA, I think we're aligned because we're all about community, home, and preventative care and making sure older adults live with dignity at homes as long as possible. Department of Health has a different agenda because a lot of it is institutional nursing home money where they're influenced by the big industry hospitals and big nursing homes. So I think there's an internal discussion of where they want to take this agenda, but what we are very clear, the Senator Rachel May and many others, we made it very clear that it has to include the community. And if we do not get the first draft and input, we will not accept it as the official master plan, and we'll just do our own, because anything that doesn't include the comments and the feedback of the experts on the ground that are doing the daily work should not be issued as a master plan of anything.
One of the things that comes up even in our discussions here today is that there's the frameworks, whether they be legislative or policy or plans, are often quite good. Enforcement is not. Can we provide resources to assure that enforcement is effective and a long-term enforcement for the benefit of the residents primarily, not necessarily for the benefit of, not only for the benefit of the facilities?
Right. Yes, we pushed for a lot more money for the ombudsman program, which is supposed to be an independent watchdog for nursing homes. But institutionally, they've defunded and they flatlined that budget to neutralize their role for so many years. And there is no enforcement Department of Labor, there's no enforcement Department of Health. There's this overall lack of administrative accountability in our state, and to a point where we've had whistleblowers in Department of Health, and they were told to stand down and they resigned. I think we lost like 7 high executive level deputy commissioner types during COVID because they just couldn't take it. They just, they could see how the bad policies and lack of administrative oversight was leading to horrible outcomes, and they just couldn't take it and they left.
And what
there are some, I'm sorry, John?
What do we do about that?
How do I feel about that?
No, what do we do?
There's a couple of good bureaucrats, and I call them bureaucrats because I think we need good bureaucrats as allies to make this back. And we need an administrative state that can actually administer programs and hold people accountable and enforce the laws that we passed. And there's a couple of good bureaucrats that came in under Hochul that I've been quietly meeting with separately, and they're in it for the right reasons. And I feel confident in those individuals. But those are just 1 or 2 people. Like if there isn't more that are coming in to dedicate 5, 6, 7 years to do the right thing and rebuild public institutions to actually function in a way that they should be functioning. All we're doing is contracting things out without any accountability, and we are privatizing, care one piecemeal at a time, and wait for the next mayor, next governor to focus on down the line. So I'm hoping that these couple individuals will be hiring and will try to execute on what they told me that they believe in. Governor Hochul is supposed to announce in our State of the State a very robust plan around long-term care, and she's already making structural changes inside of the Department of Health to separate long-term care and Medicaid from the nursing home division. So we'll see what else is in the pipeline moving forward.
Now, I have it's very technical. I don't even understand it. But this is a comment coming from Deborah Chuhowski. Thank you very much, Assemblymember Kim, for your efforts to have the EDTPA repealed. Although the legislative history reflects your wishes to make the repeal retroactive, the Appellate Division and the Fourth Division recently determined that the repeal was not retroactive. Are there any legislative efforts being considered to clarify the repeal as retroactive so that nursing homes can be held accountable for their negligent acts?
Yes. So the current law that we passed, the Grieving Families Act, would extend the statute of limitations going back 3 years. So that would allow the families who may have been rejected based on legal immunity in 2020 to now have recourse under the new law if the governor signs it without any amendments. We expect the industry to be heavy-handed in trying to amend this bill if the governor is going to sign it. So whatever we can do to urge her to sign it as it is, extend the statute of limitations going back 3 years, so families who needed time to grieve, collect evidence. And mind you, during COVID, no one was allowed to go into facilities, and also the former governor gave the nursing homes waivers in record keeping. Meaning that even if you can go in, it was very hard for people to collect evidence of negligence. So people needed time when they knew that their loved ones were dying of agony alone and pain in a negligent way. They needed more time to collect some of this evidence to have closure and have a sense of justice, not only for themselves, but to be on record. So institutionally, they don't do the same thing over to other families. This isn't just about payouts and money, but it's about holding people who act negligently accountable so they don't repeat the same mistakes moving forward.
We have a question from Nancy Stevens. Any thoughts on the federal bill to protect residents from the extremely harmful and deadly results of isolation? Families are still using COVID, facilities are still using COVID as an excuse to keep outsiders out. We, the residents, desperately need our essential caregivers to have access to any person 24/7, 365. Can you make some comments? And also, how does that affect in New York State? What can we do on the short term and the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I've been just going from individual to individual, helping constituents with each case that deal with isolation and facilities that are not allowing people to visit. So if there's so far, like we've been able to do that somewhat successfully. And if there's individual cases that you need our help with, we can do that. But going into January, that's when session starts. We can certainly look into more legislation to make sure that, moving forward, we deal with isolation and loneliness as a real problem that we completely didn't take seriously during COVID. And other states, other nations have taken this on head on. I think in Great Britain, they even have a ministry of loneliness that they've launched to allocate real funding resources and energy to confront this. But we, again, and it goes back to the ageist kind of sentiments. Like, we just don't take any of these problems institutionally seriously enough, and it's up to us now to raise our voice to make sure that we do.
Thank you. I have another question from Janine Ferrara. Mr. Kim, do you have confidence that the New York State Department of Health will support these efforts? Our family council has not had much luck with them.
I'm being very, very patient, and it's extremely frustrating because we know what's required, and there's a lack of administrative responsibility. And again, there's a couple of individuals that I feel confident about, but I haven't seen the development of the larger agency stepping in. And I just, it's almost like it's after 40 years of outsourcing everything, because that's what the Department of Health does best. And they don't do it alone. There is a shadowy quasi-government nonprofit called Health Research Institute, HRI, that does all the work for them. It is a arm of the Department of Health that contracts out most of the work that most states will look at and say, we should be doing this in-house. We should be guaranteeing these services and providing and protecting the rights of older adults and vulnerable people. But they outsource it, and they don't. And there's only 2 people in that office that does the contracting, and I think only 1 person actually follows up and do quality control. So it's not like they contract it out and there's a robust system and auditing, forensic auditors in place to make sure that the outcomes are coming in. Once it's out the government, there's just no accountability. So that's where we are, unfortunately. I think time would tell going into next session whether this governor and this administration is serious about rebuilding the Department of Health and other agencies. I think it's not going to happen overnight. I think this type of rebuilding would take 3, 4, if not even longer years to get it done. But at least I will know going into next year whether they're serious and they're building the foundation to get us there.
On following up on what you're just saying now, it reminds me that the system doesn't work. The whole process, the attitude, using this as a hospital, long-term care facilities are basically hospitals. They're supposed to be nursing homes. There's no home in it, none. It's all hospital. Aside from the basic things of why doesn't everybody have a private room and a private bathroom? Aside from that, and aside from the money issues, the ageist attitude results in the fact that there is not resources or understanding or desire to change the system. How do we do something about that here in New York State? It's all so complicated, and there's so many different components, and the dollars are huge. What legitimately will work?
Yeah,
to change the whole thing is crap.
Yeah, Jack, I think we need a top governor. The quickest way to improve and transform our broken long-term care is to have an executive officer who's willing to take this on from day one. And just like how, FDR, when he was governor, it was underneath him that we built the power authority, the port authority, where we were bold to say, hey, these private markets are not going to help save the state, and we need to activate our state resources and government to step in and build this out. If we treat the long-term care as equally as important as building bridges and building tunnels, and treat it like infrastructure and find a way to finance it like we're building infrastructure, then we'll get it done. Money won't be an issue. And I think we're at that point, and we have so many smart people, individuals, not so many right now in administration, but only a couple that are talking with me on this. But I think we can get there. And unfortunately, we don't have a visionary executive leader, but we can certainly push the next governor to be that, to follow our proposals and to be as bold as we want them to be. And that's also part of why we're advocates, and that's what we do, to push the next governor, the next mayor to be better, and give them the solutions and lay it up for them, and they can be the heroes.
Question: how would you describe the state of long-term care and nursing homes in New York State?
I think we're failing. I think we are at a deep crisis mode. It's demoralizing, and it's also going to have deep economic impacts on working families. Because many working families and professionals are giving up their jobs and careers to be full-time caregivers, and that also has a significant impact on the community and our economy. All those things, is coming to a full crash in the next few years. You would think, because of COVID and just the unimaginable number of deaths that we had in nursing homes, that we would come in and act bold and seize the moment to really step in and be transformative. But all we've done was put maybe 2 or 3 band-aids and create some task force to study the issue and call it a day. And that's not good enough. And I don't care if no one writes about it, no one in the press cares about it. Like, for me, and many of my colleagues that are in my committee and working with me care extremely about this, because it's personal, but it also impacts our constituents who we can see are suffering, and they're getting old, they're aging, and they're suffering from mental depression, anxiety, all that we can see in real time. And it is so demoralizing to go door to door during campaign time and other periods, and they ask you the same questions after year, and for you not to have real answers and solutions that are being delivered, the changes that that could fix this problem. So yeah, I mean, I think Jack, your passion, the people that are here, your passions.
Well, everybody on this call is the passion.
Yeah.
Everyone. Now, there's the Long-Term Care Commission that was signed by the governor. It was legislative by enacted, or Rachel May's commission. Is it a whitewash?
Yeah, it was in my committee. I think we gave it to member Catalina Cruz. I had internal pushback because I think it involved too much of the institutional stakeholders and not enough of the voice of the residents and the workers that should have been at the forefront of that commission. But I think Senator May has good intentions, and I'll continue to work with her, and as a main sponsor of that bill, I'm hoping that she can nudge them as they administer the commission to be more resident, patient, consumer, and worker centered.
It appears to us that there hasn't even been any meetings of this commission. And that you properly note that it's heavily weighted to the industry, and there were only 2 members that were about the residents, and then a couple of members about labor, and the rest of them about the industry. It was AARP and the Long-Term Care Community Coalition to represent the people. But the people are the ones who are suffering. They're the ones who died. How about honoring those by doing something right for a change?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Jack. I've never been a fan of these task forces or commissions that, you know, don't have any much, that if they don't have enough teeth, and if they don't have the right representation, what it could have a negative effect in validating an industry narrative that is counter to what we're trying to push for, which is improving the institutions to be better.
And I don't think that anybody on this call thinks that making a profit is bad. It's the greed that's bad. It's how do you balance that to make sure that the people who are in any long-term care situation have the opportunity to thrive, have the opportunity for their dignity. And are we actually doing that as a society? Are we doing that with our money? I'm not so sure about that. And then how in New York State are we going to create that change? It can't be just legislative. Enforcement is really important, and that comes from the administration of the legislation, as well as societal access. How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to building up our administrative governments, public institutions that actually can administer programs. There's massive wage theft. There's for workers, the consumers are not getting the care that they need, and there's lack of accountability. And all because an entire long-term care system is based on a deficit of funding that don't fully support the needs and demands of our constituents. So right now, I think the first step we can do is hold some of the worst facilities, the nursing homes, accountable. Make sure that our state is doing their part, our attorney general is doing her part to come down and crack down on these facilities that have walked away with tens and tens of millions of dollars of profits. As an industry, they walked away over $1 billion in 2020 of profits. And, you know, we need to go back and hold them accountable.
Oh, yes. We're at 3:02. I would like to ask you, Assemblymember Kim, what is our call to action?
Our call to action is, there's so many, and I just
We'll take 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, signing the Grieving Families Act as it is with that amendment is important. I know that there are many providers also on this call, and you may think that they may negatively impact your business or what you're doing, but I promise that it won't. The other states that have done it, what it does is institutionally, culturally, we push each other to be better and root out the bad operators as an industry. Because if you're now shortchanging and acting negligently on your duty to care for your clients and your consumers, there's a cost that's going to come with that. And I think signing that bill, what it does is changes the wrongful death statute again to update an outdated law that devalued women, older, immigrant, people of color's lives that goes back 160 years. You would update it for the 21st century, and that would have such a huge impact on how we treat older adults in the disabled communities. So please ask the governor to sign it. We are actively looking for experts, people with knowledge around social impact bonds, social impact insurance. Someone mentioned that earlier. If you want to talk to me about these proposals, we are actively sourcing as much information to figure out, in lieu of the federal government stepping in and making Medicaid home care guaranteed program, how do we at the local and state level figure out to finance and pay for home and community care to meet everyone's needs? So if you got something for me, please reach out to me. I will put my email on the chat room now. Contact at cap. Oh no, that was to one person. Sorry. Hold on one second. How do I send to all? Oh, here you go. Okay. Contact at Caring Capital.
Oh,
Okay.
Caring Capital what.com org.
It's just contact at caring.capital.
Okay, we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
I just wanted to, we are honored that you gave us some of your valuable time today for this town hall. I hope that we've had an enlightening session for you and for everybody on this call, including to create some sort of an initiative to do this. We need to do this together. There's a big mess that needs to be cleaned up. I hope that together we'll be able to do it, and with everybody on this call, because everybody has the big heart and the sechel to do it. So we want to say thank you so much, Assemblymember Kim, for taking time and for helping us through and to understand.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.